Hey, what up? This is Zach Guilford from Midnight Mass, and you're listening to one of my favorite podcasts, Pop Culture Pastor.
Pop Culture Pastor.
You know, people say, who you got? Are you team Britney or team Christina? And do people still say that? I don't know. Maybe that's a thing. Maybe that's not a thing anymore.
I think it's a thing amongst millennials.
Yeah, or maybe younger Gen X like myself.
Yes.
I don't know. Maybe I just hear it because of the circles I run in. Big Britney, Christina fans in my circles.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously.
I like to call Christina X-Tina.
Why would you like to call her that?
Because that's how people spell her name. So.
Christina's obviously the more talented.
Oh, yeah.
But Britney's a wild card, and I kind of dig that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not choosing in this battle.
Britney got she got emancipated finally from her dad, which, how crazy is that? Like, how crazy to be like 40 years old and to still have your dad like controlling your life. Like, that's nuts, right?
Yeah.
But that stuff happens. This stuff happens all the time with those, minor celebrities when they're minors. They become celebrities when they're young.
And I mean, this happens quite a bit within celebrity culture that, like, there's just these, like, when Dave Chappelle left and went to Africa for a while, I mean, there's these mental breaks where people have to get away. And for Britney, there may have been a time that she needed that conservatorship, guardianship over her, but I think that time has long passed.
Yeah. What's that like to be past the point where everyone knows that you're the worst parent ever? Like, that you're totally motivated by greed and you don't love your kid enough to be like, but the money's more important. Like, because that's where Britney's dad went, right? He long past that point.
Face value, yes.
How awful is that?
Either he really does believe that him being over her estate was the best thing for her because it was one less stressor on her. Mm-hmm. And that's why she was thriving. Or he knew the writing's on the wall. You either completely give up and say, here, this is yours, or you double down. He chose to double down.
Yeah. Yeah. And when he chose to do that, it's like telling everybody, I don't love my kid as much as I love the money.
Yeah.
Like, as a parent, don't you? I try to put myself in that situation, although my kids don't have that kind of talent. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
I was going to say, there's like chefs in your family. There's karate kids. There's dance.
That was just a joke. I love my children, but I try to put myself in that scenario, of which I don't even think we could be in, because I'm probably a believer. I've obviously never been faced with that dilemma, but I'm probably going to side on the fact that, like, no, I want my kids to be kids. I'm not going to push them into full-time careers when they're children. I don't care how talented they are. But yeah, I try to put myself in that position. And at some point, when your adult children says, no, I'm taking back control, don't you just bow out gracefully and be like, okay, I love you. And I'm here if you need help.
Yeah. Then again, there's so many examples of stars that didn't get help that aren't with us anymore. And so it's a tough position to be in, to be placed into that. But without knowing all the facts, it's tough. Yeah.
Christine is clearly more talented, but I don't like the things she does with her hands when she sings. It just bugs me. So I'm Team Britney. I think I'm Team Britney.
I don't have a team. I'm Team everyone.
And I'm struggling to think of like an iconic moment that Christina Aguilera had as big as the iconic moments that Britney had at like the MTV Music Awards with the snake. That was like iconic. Yeah. I remember like that. I remember when that happened. I remember like seeing it all over TV, and it was just a big deal. People were going crazy about it. And I was just like, okay, it's a snake.
When Moulin Rouge came out,
that was probably Christina at her peak, right?
And then the one of her music videos where she's boxing or wrestling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The problem is her peak was Moulin Rouge, and she shared this the peak, the spotlight with who was in it, like who sang that? Was Maya was in that? Remember Maya?
Yeah.
Who else was in that song? Pink.
Pink was Missy Elliott in it.
Yeah, you're right. I think Missy Elliott was in. Although, was she? Did she have a part in that song, or was she just in the video?
I think that she rapped on it.
Anyways, that was a great song, though.
It was.
Rouge, yeah. Okay, I didn't plan on starting the show like that, but it was fun to talk about whether I was team Britney or team. Are you team one or the other? Are you going to enlighten us?
I'm team everyone.
Oh, come on. What a cop-out. Christina seems nice. No hard feelings, Christina.
Yes, Missy was.
Missy Elliott, yeah. That was a big deal too, Moulin Rouge, although I never saw that movie.
No, just listen to the soundtrack.
Okay, welcome to Pop Culture Pastor 6 minutes later. After our Team Britney versus Team Christina discussion. First off, right off the bat here on the podcast, we want to update the Tournament of Tournaments.
Okay, I'm ready.
We are about to be down. Let's see. 1, 2, 3. We're about to be down to the Elite Eight.
Dun, dun, dun.
The Elite Eight, as March Madness is upon us. There's no good way to do this. Let's just get into it. Captain America, Winter Soldier over Black Panther, 46-26.
That's about right.
Yeah, I think it should have been closer. I think Black Panther is a great movie, but I can't argue because Winter Soldier is probably one of the best comic book movies. It's like a top 5 comic book movie in my opinion.
Yeah.
So it's very good, but Black Panther, if it's outside the top 5, it's not much. It's very good as well. But Captain America, Winter Soldier, the 1 seed moves on. The closest this matchup, this was amazing. It's the 2 seed versus the 3 seed. Spider-Man No Way Home 37, Avengers Infinity War 34.
I'm for it.
So Spider-Man No Way Home ekes out a victory over Avengers Infinity War, and they move on. Spider-Man No Way Home will go up against Captain America Winter Soldier to go to the Final Four. Ooh. That's a battle of heavies. I have no idea which way that one's going to go.
There's a lot of recency bias, I feel, coming up.
Yeah, I feel like Spider-Man's got a good shot there, but we'll see. I thought it would have won more against Infinity War, but I do feel like we seeded this wrong. Like, if I'm just going by movie, I think Infinity War is better than Endgame. And we gave Endgame a 1 seed and Infinity War a 2 seed just on kind of popularity. But I actually think Infinity War is a better film than Endgame because it ends unexpectedly.
It does.
It subverts tropes.
Yeah. Although there's a lot of emotions and weight that culminates in Endgame, and it's really hard to separate the two.
There are bigger moments in Endgame.
Yeah.
But as a whole, I kind of want to say Infinity War is a more complete movie. But Infinity War's out, taken out by Spider-Man No Way Home. Speaking of Endgame, it had an easier road, 54-16 over Guardians of the Galaxy.
How dare you?
You're mad about that.
I am. I wanted that to Guardians to at least get 30.
Yeah, we talked about Guardians last week, and from a comic book standpoint, I feel like James Gunn did more with less kind of comic book, background to build something there. And so I thought maybe he deserves more credit, but at the end of the day, Endgame is Endgame.
I'm only a little upset.
Now, this one came down to the wire. Captain America Civil War was leading most of the way against Thor Ragnarok. And Ragnarok pulled off like the last 10 votes I saw to win it 43-34.
Yeah.
Over Captain America Civil War. But man, there was a while there where people were voting for Civil War. I was like, oh man, Thor Ragnarok got down like double digits at one point. And I was like, Ragnarok's going to lose.
I'm not even going to lie. Ragnarok is probably my favorite solo Marvel movie.
Yeah. I mean, so the Marvel bracket plays out the way we seeded it. So maybe we didn't seed it wrong because you got the 2 1 seeds and the 2 2 seeds, and they're about to go at it to see who gets to the Final Four.
I'm rooting for a 2 seed. I'll let you know that.
Over in the DC independent side of the bracket, where there was just mass chaos.
It is the Batman bracket, as I like to refer to it.
We will not be having, it did not play out according to the seeds. And some of that continued, although The Dark Knight over Tim Burton's Batman, 1989, 66-11.
It should have been like 76-1. And I would have said, who are you, you one person?
There were people that voted for it that commented below the poll who said, I know Dark Knight's a better movie, but the Batman came out at a time in my life and Michael Keaton is so beloved to me that I felt like I had to vote for it.
Michael Keaton as Beetlejuice, maybe. Not as my Batman.
Listen, I'm just telling you, there are people that swear by it. People older. I mean, it didn't hit you in the sweet spot.
I'm just saying, it came out the year I was born. I grew up.
That's not your sweet spot, by the way, for pop culture.
All the Batman around me, and I had it on VHS. I watched it a ton.
There's something to be said for, and I said a little bit about this in past shows, where there was just no TV show, movies, anything that Batman, there'd never been a Batman seriously done in a visual medium, okay, video medium. So like Adam West Batman, which people loved, by the way. My uncle, like people that grew up around that time, loved the Adam West Batman. And
Holy Rusted Nails Batman.
And when I got into comic books and I would go back and watch some of those, catch them on syndication, oh my goodness. So bad. I'm like, what is this? Why did anyone like this? It's so corny and campy, but people loved it. And so when Tim Burton did his version of the Batman, and I remember people like you know what the biggest deal was when that movie came out in 1989? He put him in an all black suit. It's so dark. They thought that was dark, man.
You haven't seen the Snyder cut.
I mean, Batman Returns, there's literally oversized rubber duckies. It's so dark. Man, you all don't know what's coming. It's just going to keep getting darker.
Metaphorically and literally.
Now, people are complaining about the Batman that's out in theaters and making a killing. People are complaining about the darkness of that movie. We did a review pod last week. I don't remember struggling to see once.
No, like if you said I struggled when there was the power went out and the guns are going off and that's the only way you see Batman. Okay, yeah.
But that was a cool effect.
It was.
Yeah, I don't understand.
That would be the scene that it was hard to see in.
There was a lot of headlines given and memes coming out about the darkness of the movie and people complaining about the darkness. Not like in tone, but in actual picture. And I just kept thinking, man, I don't even remember thinking I struggled seeing stuff.
You all need to get your eyes checked.
And our theater, we live in a small town. Our theater is not quality.
Yeah, no.
Sorry, B&B.
My favorite thing to come out about this is this video clip of a kid talking about how dark Batman Returns was, like the images.
Yeah, you sent me that today. Someone, he was doing a review.
Yes, he was.
Of Tim Burton's Batman Returns. And that it was, what did he say? It was, it
was like preying on
little kids. He was making fun of kids because of the rubber duckies.
And the clowns, the rubber duckies and the clowns. And he was like, I had to watch this twice So I knew why I didn't believe in it or like it. And I was like,
hey, listen, people nowadays think that the younger generations have cornered the market on cancel culture. There was a little bit that was present back in the 80s and early 90s.
Tipper Gore.
Tipper Gore went on like a one-woman crusade against like rock music, and then she moved on to gangsta rap, which, yeah, if we're being fair, gangsta rap was a little much.
Married with children as well.
Oh, I forgot. She went after the Bundys. I mean,
not even Ted Bundy, but Al Bundy.
Do people not understand that was part of the joke? Like that they were so awful? Like none of the Bundys are good people. That's the point. But if they there's go visit people around your town, you're going to run into families like that. And they played it for laughs. And they made you. Here's the brilliance of a show like Married with Children, is they're not good people and they made you care about them. They literally did what Jesus wants you to do. To love everybody and pray for your enemies. And here's a show that basically shows this awful, like everyone's awful. Peg's awful. Al's really awful. Bud is awful. And Christina Applegate Kelly is awful. They're an awful character or family, and yet you care about them.
Yeah.
And who do you not like? The goody two-shoes neighbors who don't do anything wrong.
Except they're all snobby like at times. Kind of like the Pharisees.
Nah, I didn't see it. I'm just kidding. Yeah. So, anyways, we went on down a rabbit hole.
Dark Knight won.
Dark Knight over the Batman, 66-11. Although I did enjoy our little Married with Children aside there. The next, we got another upset. I think, anyways, it's the Joker falling to Superman, the movie.
Who are you?
The old heads show it out at the election booth.
They evidently had not seen the Joker.
I love it. I love that the DC bracket is eating itself from the inside.
Well, spoiler alerts, if the Dark Knight loses to Superman, I am walking out.
Christopher Reeve's Superman, the movie from 1979, I think.
Gross. Just gross.
Way to go, old heads.
Joaquin Phoenix turns in an acting performance of the generation, and then you
settle down.
You poo-poo on it.
Settle down.
He won an Oscar for it.
Settle down. No, I mean, he's not better than Heath Ledger. No. All right, yes, Superman the movie will go on to face the Dark Knight in the round of the Elite Eight. It was the Dark Knight Rises. This is semi-surprising. 42 over Batman Begins 30. So
that's justified.
The third installment beats the first installment.
There's more action in the third installment.
I will say I've rewatched Batman Begins and the Dark Knight recently.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as first movies go, I would definitely place The Batman over Batman Begins. Not a doubt in my mind. And I see when it comes to Batman Begins, judging it against The Dark Knight, I can see it either way. It really doesn't have anything to do with how good of a Batman movie they made. It depends on how you like your comic book movies to be structured.
Mm-hmm.
So Dark Knight is a heavily comic booky, chaotic action movie.
Yeah.
The Batman is almost a parable. It's a story. It's a moral story that has the Batman as a character in it.
Yes.
And so it just kind of depends. I'm just going to say it. I kind of like the Batman more than I like the Dark Knight.
That is an okay statement.
Yeah.
At this point,
I don't argue with if someone says they still like the Dark Knight better. I'm fine with that. I will say there's not a performance in the Batman like Heath Ledger's Joker in Dark Knight.
I have always said I can't separate like the events around Heath Ledger and his passing and the Dark Knight. Like I can't separate my emotions out of it, so it's really hard for me to judge anything above the Dark Knight. But I feel in my heart of hearts that the Batman was better.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, I think Dark Knight Rises because it has a better villain. A more interesting villain. The thing I didn't like about Batman Begins on rewatch was how do you have Liam Neeson as Ra's al Ghul?
You rarely see him.
And yeah, he's barely a part of the movie, and he's not that interesting when he is.
Yeah.
And Cillian Murphy does his best to hold up the villain end of it as the Scarecrow, but even he's not that interesting either.
I almost feel they spent too much time on like developing Bruce and his anger about his parents dying in that movie.
Yeah.
And missed like the big picture with Ra's al Ghul. And hindsight being 2020, I wouldn't want him to die in the first movie because he is a bigger villain within the Batman world. But Bane breaking the bat in The Dark Knight Rises might be the most iconic scene.
Yeah, and Tom Hardy's pretty fantastic. He gets overshadowed because of Heath Ledger in Dark Knight, but Tom Hardy's pretty fantastic in that movie as Bane. And Dark Knight Rises will move on to face Men in Black. I was not prepared for Men in Black to do as good as it has done in this tournament over Shazam, 46-35. No, that means you disagree.
Like, I'm okay with it being a toss-up, but I want it to be a toss-up in favor of Shazam.
I feel like I think Shazam's a great movie and maybe one of the best DCEU movies, if not the best.
I'll say it.
I feel like in order to vote for Men in Black as the best comic book movie, as a better comic book movie, you should have at least be old enough to have read some of the Men in Black comics, which were wildly different than what the movie is.
I actually own one.
Like, it's wildly different. But it's okay. I loved Men in Black, the first movie. I loved that movie.
I think the Will Smith effect.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Will Smith is great.
So you put Will Smith against Zach Levi, and people are going to be like, I'm choosing Will.
Yep. Yep. And that's what happened. Now you're going to have Men in Black and Dark Knight Rises to go to the Final Four. On the other side of the DC independent bracket, Dark Knight versus Superman the movie. We could have Dark Knight versus Dark Knight Rises to go to the championship game.
Should be.
And then the Marvel side, it was all the 1 and 2 seeds advancing. Captain America Winter Soldier will go up against Spider-Man No Way Home. That's a slobber knocker, as they used to call him back in the day. Avengers Endgame will go on to face Thor Ragnarok. That should also be a pretty close one. We'll see what happens. Those polls will be up on, I think I'm going to put them up on Saturday. That will be one day after this podcast drops. We'll give you time to listen to the podcast, listen to the update.
Do your diligence and vote.
Do your due diligence. Lots of do's in there.
If I need to invite Sean P. Diddy Combs, Puff Daddy, if you will, on the show and have him tell you vote or die or rock the vote, I will do it.
Oh, man, that was a deep, deep cut. That's like you'd have to be an older millennial to remember that.
You would, and I am. So you're welcome.
All right. So we started off the podcast with the update of the Tournament of the Tournaments. To crown the best comic book movie, look for the polls to vote for who makes the Final Four tomorrow, Saturday on the places you've been voting. So that would be on our Facebook page, the Pop Culture Pastor Facebook page. Follow that one. Or follow us on Twitter. Polls also going up on Twitter as well. So check it out. And then while you're there, you should just follow those accounts, subscribe to our podcast, all that stuff. We'll be right back. We're going to take a break. We'll come back with our news and main subject all in one segment this week.
Sweet.
Okay, welcome back to the Pop Culture Pastor Podcast, episode 22, Cody. We're 22 episodes in. I don't know if we're hitting our stride yet or not, but
we're getting closer.
Yeah, maybe we're getting close. We got a big top speed, but our acceleration's not good.
Yeah.
But top speed, once we get there, you're going to be blown away.
Ready or not, here we come.
All right, the way the show is working this week is we updated the Tournament of Tournaments in that first segment. Now what we're going to do is we're going to do some of our news bits. We're going to look at some of the things making headlines, and then we're just going to go right into our main subject because it is news related. And when I mean news related, I mean like world events. We're going to talk about pop culture and Russia, and in particular, how pop culture is affecting our view of what is happening in the Ukraine right now. And maybe, well, yeah, just kind of how pop culture mingles with our observations of that. And how pop culture is reacting to that as far as Hollywood and singers and, even as far as the Paralympics. So we'll talk about a lot of culture-y things as it pertains to Russia and Ukraine. That is our main subject. But first, let's just get into some random headlines here. Jussie Smollett was found guilty and then sentenced to 30 months of probation, including 150 days in jail, of which they said he was going to have to spend at least 50 of in jail, like a third of it in jail before he'd be eligible to get out.
Okay.
That was until today. So he's been in jail, what? How long ago was this? It hasn't even been a week, right?
I don't think so, yeah.
And we've got justice for Juicy, as Dave Chappelle has iconically said now. He was in a 2-1 decision. An appeals court agreed with Smollett's lawyers that he could be released after posting a personal recognizance bond of $150,000, according to the Associated Press. Per the ruling, he doesn't have to put down money, but agrees to come to court as required. So his lawyers filed an emergency motion on Monday arguing that his sentence would be completed by the time the appeal process was litigated, because they're appealing, and that their client could be in physical danger if he remained in jail, and that was enough to sway the judge. I mean, isn't that the point of jail?
I was going to say, spoiler alert, anyone that goes to jail has the potential of being physically harmed in jail.
I mean, here's the funny thing about the Jussie Smollett stuff. Like, if he's really there's talk. I know his lawyers have talked about the mental state of him, and if he's got mental issues, then hey, listen, I'm not arguing against it. Mm-hmm. If he's got mental issues, get him out of there, get him where he can get some help. That's fine. Yeah. But I will say this. If you're wondering why Jussie Smollett doesn't have the backing of the black community as a whole in this matter, it's because, look, he just played the celebrity card, basically.
Yeah.
And gets to not go to jail like he was told to go to jail. I mean, he's basically saying his lawyers argued that he could get hurt. Why? Because he's a celebrity. Because it's news. He made headlines.
Yeah. And, I mean, that also disregards how... I mean, his claims are going to affect how some people view potential hate crimes in the future. Did this really happen? Is this made up?
Yeah.
And so his dishonesty really set back a segment of the population. And so if he really does have mental health concerns, jail's probably not going to be effective for him. Somewhere where he can get mental health treatment, yeah, that's great. Do that. And then issue an apology. But if this is also another ploy to just get out serving a jail sentence, I'm not for that.
Yeah.
I mean, jail is not ideal for anyone, really, but That's the system we have.
I'm conflicted because he's not guilty of a violent crime. If you're convicted of like some violent crime, then I don't want to hear about you. Oh, my client may get hurt in prison. Yeah, well, sorry. That's what prison is it's not a great place to be. And if your client gets hurt there, then they shouldn't have hurt someone to get there. So he's not guilty of that. So I'm conflicted in a way because there's a part of me that says, well, it's jail. What did you think was going to happen? But then also I'm like, okay, he did a bad thing. And we can sit here and talk about how bad it was. Like, you know, you just went through the details of. But at the same time, I'm like, he's not a violent criminal. And does he deserve to go get beat up because people know his name in jail? Probably not.
I mean, there are facilities that...
Yeah, why didn't he go to Club Med?
Yeah.
What?
Like, there's some nice places.
Minimum security.
Yeah. And I go wherever they send the people that are guilty of Ponzi schemes.
Where did they send him? Do we know? Or where were they trying to send him? Recently sentenced to Cook County Jail. I mean, how bad can Cook County Jail be?
Is Cook County Chicago?
Yes.
I hear the south side of Chicago. It's the baddest part of town.
Anyways, that's what's happening with Jesse. He's out on bond,
Like,
presumably safe.
I'm not upset. Like, I'm going to throw hands because he's out, but at the same time, you did something that is wrong, and this is what the judge came up with. If the judge would have said, I want you to do like 100 hours plus of community service and pay this charity this amount, I'd been like, oh, that's great. That's actually kind of helpful.
Do we think he's got money, or is it all gone now?
Before this, I would say he had money.
I mean, part of the motivation, there was rumors that part of the motivation he had for doing this was because his role wasn't getting bigger on Empire, and that maybe he wanted to make it become bigger to get paid more. I don't know. A lot of that's iffy information.
Yeah. I don't know.
Anyways, that's just conjecture. Who knows? I would think that a good portion of his money has gone to lawyer fees, but who knows? He's certainly, he's done acting, right? That's done. Surely he's not going to get another job. What does he do now?
I think he will.
You think so?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, who? The Grey's Anatomy lady? The lady that, what's her name? She created Grey's Anatomy, has all those shows.
I don't know her name.
She's big supporter of Black Lives Matter, so she may.
Yeah.
Because Black Lives Matter had never wavered in their support for Jesse. They continued supporting even after it was pretty clear he was lying.
Yeah, there'll be shows. Yeah. If not, he can do theater.
It'll be interesting to see.
I think that he has a history in...
Yeah, I could see theater maybe. It'll be interesting to see because Jesse, as I said, while the Black Lives Matter movement kept supporting him and was behind him, your average, black man and woman in the United States, and I judge this by, well, frankly, pretty much all of black Twitter, not fans.
Yeah.
They're not going. It's a lot like, it's funny. It's because Dave Chappelle actually kind of lets you in on that. They weren't dragging him, but they weren't supporting him either.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see if someone will let Jesse, after he's paid his penalty, if they'll give him another job again. I don't know. Sad news this week from anyone who loved wrestling growing up. And when I say growing up, I mean in my early 20s.
Growing up for me.
Oh, man. When I was in my early 20s, let me set this up. I loved WCW wrestling from about 1995-ish till whenever it ended, 2001 maybe. And during that time is much of that is the era of the NWO, the New World Order. And this was when basically some of your beloved wrestlers, Hulk Hogan, Macho Man Randy Savage, they went bad, joining up with the likes of Kevin Nash and this guy, Scott Hall. Scott Hall, also known for portraying another beloved heel. Heels were the bad guys. That's what the terminology in the WWE, as he was beloved heel, Razor Ramon. And Scott Hall, after complications from a hip replacement surgery, he just went in for hip replacement surgery. Some blood clotting happened, and he passed away at 63 years old. And man, I'm going to tell you what, this one hit me hard. This one hit me hard because before I go to bed, I watch WCW Nitro. And right now I'm somewhere around, I think I'm in 1997, and the NWO is in full swing. And man, Scott Hall in particular, I'm watching it with a renewed vigor and focus on him, especially this last week. He was so good at being the heel, and yet people loved him.
Yeah.
Every time he would come back, he'd be gone for a little while because he battled demons, man. He had alcohol problems, and he'd be gone for a while, and it was clear he was at rehab. But when he would come back, even though he's part of the NWO and the bad guys, huge pop.
Yeah, and he did such a great job of just portraying that persona, which everyone that was in the locker room would tell you that's not who he was. He was actually a really nice dude.
Yeah.
And so...
Well, he's not Latino.
Yeah.
He's not. So the whole Razor Ramon character and kind of informed his Scott Hall character when he came to the WCW. He dropped like the heavy accent for the most part.
Yeah.
But it still kind of informed his look and everything. He wasn't Latino, but I saw people this week in tributes to him saying, even though he wasn't Latino, this person who was posting this on social media said, I, as a Latino, like he really brought me and my dad together. My dad was a first generation American, and we loved wrestling. We loved Razor Ramon. We loved Scott Hall. And I just thought, man, what can there be a better like tribute than that?
Yeah, and especially within the culture now.
Yeah, where you might get flack for that.
Oh, he would get flack for that.
Yeah.
And I mean, he's a part of maybe the most transformative group within wrestling, most transformative faction within wrestling history, the NWO, that literally turns the whole like industry on itself, and like it pushes WCW in front of WWF/E for a while.
It's hard to. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, and that is amazing from where like WCW began.
Right. It's that was I was going to say it's hard to describe to someone who wasn't into wrestling at that time just how big that was, because so the NWO, you always had good guys and bad guys.
Oh, yeah.
But this was, and you had guys that would switch back and forth. But what they did was take your perennial good guys and made them go bad out of nowhere. And then they were just bad, like the worst guys.
Hollywood Hulk Hogan.
Hulk Hogan turns out to I enjoyed Hulk Hogan as a heel more than I ever did as a hero.
He went from telling you to say your prayers and eat your vitamins to, I'm going to spray paint on your back after I beat you.
And it's hard to describe what a big deal WCW overtaking and passing the WWF at the time in terms of viewership and popularity, how insane that was. Because WWF was, now WWE was huge.
Oh, yeah.
It was the wrestling company. And so when WCW and it lasts for a couple years, and that's about it, at the peak, where it's that style. And then it starts to go down a little bit, and then WWE buys WCW.
And then butchers the transition. So
Woof, you're not kidding, man. I mean, it took them. Goldberg's probably the biggest thing going in the WCW when they buy it, and it takes years before Goldberg's a big deal in the W. In fact, within the last 5 years,
Goldberg and Sting both.
A much older Goldberg is now finally kind of a big deal in the WWE
because Sting refused to wrestle with the WWE.
Yeah,
and then 15 years later, okay, I'm old and washed up and my body will give out on me in the middle of the ring, but I'll do it just because this should have been done 15 years ago.
I love that with Sting, the WCW to the end wasn't an act.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Just, I can't really, in a time in my life where I just didn't watch a lot of TV, WCW, I had VHS tapes, the ones where I just kept recording over them so I could watch, because I was often doing other things at that age of my life, working. I worked a lot of evenings. Man, I'd get some Taco Bell and go home and watch WCW Nitro on VHS, recorded off my VCR. And I just can't really describe how big in that point in my life that was. And Scott Hall was a part of that. And so, yeah, when that happened, when this happened the other day, I was pretty bummed.
So I was in grade school when the NWO takes off.
It's probably a big deal to you then.
It was a big deal. And so WWF/E had pushed the limits with going more vulgar at that time.
Yeah.
Because you're in the Raw era. And so
the Attitude Era.
Yeah, the Attitude Era. Yeah. And so Raw is war. And then, my parents were like, Cody, you can't watch this.
Yeah, I could see that. So WCW for about a year just kind of focuses on the NWO. And then there's a point where they start hitting it where all of a sudden there's a lot more women scantily clad.
Yeah.
The Nitro girls show up. Yeah, it goes to this place where it wasn't really for kids, like young kids, as much.
It started off in a better spot.
But it's weird because, most people have two phases of wrestling watching in their lives. So, and it's usually when you were a kid, grade schooler, and then young adult or upper high school, right? So, for me, when I was in grade school, I was into the WWF when Hulk Hogan and Macho Man were the mega powers. The great WrestleManias with Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant, Iron Sheik, Nikolai Volkov, the Junkyard Dog. I'm really into that when I'm a kid. They even had a Saturday morning cartoon, the Hulk Hogan and the WWF All-Stars. And it was awesome. Captain Lou Albano, the rubber band earrings. You have those two phases of wrestling watching. When I was a kid, I didn't really understand it. I just liked it, the entertainment value of it. But as an adult, I really got into WCW. And a lot of that is thanks to guys like Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, Hulk Hogan going heel.
The Hulkster.
And when you hear people talk about those guys, these are the guys they hold up and say, man, they were the good ones. Hulk Hogan, by all accounts, people in wrestling loved him because he did anything for the show, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a great documentary about Goldberg when Goldberg is becoming huge in the WCW, where Hulk Hogan basically goes to the bosses and says after a couple years of Goldberg being the man, he hadn't wrestled Hulk Hogan. And Hulk Hogan said, hey, let's do this. Let's have him wrestle me. He'll win in the end. It'll be his big coming out party. And listening to Bill Goldberg talk about how Hulk Hogan guided him through that. It really is a fraternity, the wrestling fraternity.
In which, at that time, Hulkster is he's aging out, or should be. He'll keep wrestling, don't worry.
Do you think he was on roids? Did he use steroids, you think?
Do I think? You don't get...
How old is he now?
26-inch pythons or whatever they were...
You looked at me like I was an idiot. Hulk Hogan.
Don't tell me it was a protein shake.
He was born in 1953. So in 1997, let's say, he's 44 years old. And dude, because I've been watching these WCWs, these Nitros, man, he still looks amazing.
Yes.
As a 40-some-year-old. On up until when he goes back to WWE.
And he'll wrestle until he's like in his 60s.
Is he still wrestling?
No, he finally gave that up. And he released a statement this week, actually, that he knows body-wise he can't do it anymore.
Oh, man.
Thank God.
Goodness, yeah. We don't need him, like, jumping off a rope and breaking his tibia.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, man, bummer news about Scott Hall. He had the toothpick in his mouth. He'd throw the toothpick at the camera or sometimes at a dude.
Yes.
And it was just part of his shtick, and it was wonderful. He gave me wonderful times of entertainment. The next news story, Billy Joel is getting a biopic.
Does he need one?
It's Billy Joel, it's the Piano Man. Why wouldn't he have one?
I'm trying to think.
Do you not think Billy Joel is iconic as a musician?
He's iconic.
I mean, that's what happens now. I mean, Johnny Cash, Ray Charles.
There's significant
They get biopics.
There's significant life events that I could point to within those guys' lives, where Billy Joel, like, he married like above his looks. Then that's, I guess, a thing. So,
according to Variety, the film, which is being written and directed by Adam Ripp, follows the early stages of Billy Joel's career, from being discovered by Erwin Mazer to his breakthrough 1972 performance that caught the eye of Clive Davis.
So it's just about him becoming famous.
Here's the weird part. You ready for this?
Okay.
The movie does not have the rights to his music, name, likeness, or life story.
Yes. Go Billy.
How are they? That seems like it would end the movie, would it not?
This will be a story about William Joel.
They required the rights to Erwin Mazer's life, who discovered him, and he repped Joel. He represented Joel from 1970 to 1972, just before he released the title song Piano Man in 1973, which I didn't realize it was that old.
Me either.
So they're only going to be able to music before 1973. How are they going to do this?
I'll tell you, I won't be watching unless someone buys my ticket.
Very strange. This is one of the weirdest pop culture news stories I read this past week. Hey, there's going to be a Billy Joel biopic, but they can't use his music, his name. Like, what in the world? William Joel. Okay. We got to talk about some trailers that came out. The Kenobi trailer came out since our last pod.
As the youth say, the old Ben trailer.
Oh, man. No one can ever say Lucasfilm doesn't know how to cut a trailer. Oh, my goodness. Are they just masters of this? Every trailer to the sequel trilogy movies made me think that the sequel trilogy was going to be amazing.
Think again.
And that's the only reason I have even a little doubt about Kenobi, because right now I'm all in.
Who is the showrunner for Kenobi?
Well, it's Filoni. This is the Filoni verse.
Okay.
Although technically it's not. It's Kathleen Kennedy. She's the one in charge.
Yes.
And then now I'm right back to where I started. I'm conflicted. I'm like, I don't know. Here's what I do know. The trailer's amazing. It's perfectly crafted. They use Duel of the Fates. They use music from episode 3. It has a prequel feel to it. If the prequel was cooler, I'm full backstory. I'm rewatching the prequels with my kids right now. We're in the middle of it. And oh my goodness, Attack of the Clones is worse than you remember. Episode 2 is so dreadful. It's so bad.
I feel like there's a lot of Jar Jar.
Not in episode 2. Episode 1, there's a lot of Jar Jar. Episode 2, Jar Jar's only in it for about just long enough to bring down the Senate.
That's
and to give emergency powers to the Emperor. Or the leader. Soon to be about to become the Emperor.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's just in it for that long. I don't what I didn't remember was, oh man, does Anakin look like a stalker? The whole relationship with Padme is just so weirdly handled. He seems like obsessed with her, and it seems kind of creepy. And then Padme's kind of into it, which even seems weirder, because you're just like, no girl would like this treatment.
Adult Natalie Portman would not like this.
Anyways, this is just a little rabbit hole we went down there. Attack of the Clones is bad. Far worse than The Phantom Menace, in my opinion. It's just bad. The dialogue is just cringy. It's so bad.
I feel with the prequels, you could easily make several series and redeem the prequel somewhat.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, there's not enough back and side stories to some cool characters that are in the prequels that like get 10 minutes of screen time and then, oh, they're gone.
Yeah, even the action sequences, which is in the first one, in The Phantom Menace, kind of saved the movie. You got the pod racing scene, which is great. The lightsaber battle at the end, which is iconic, I think, in Star Wars. It's one of the, it's if not the best lightsaber battle scene. I don't know which one's better.
Yeah.
That scene's amazing at the end of The Phantom Menace. The clone Attack of the Clones. Oh man, the only scene that I'm super interested in is when he kills the Tuskens. After he finds his mom, they've taken his mom. They captured her, kidnapped her, basically. And he kills all the Tuskens, and although you don't really see it. And then he tells Padme, he says, and not just the men, I killed the women and the children. And then Padme's look is like not quite horrified enough. Like if the person you're falling in love with says that to you as a Jedi who's supposed to be like an icon of peace in the galaxy, she should have been horrified that he killed the women and the children.
Oh yeah.
But she doesn't look horrified. Anyways, that scene I think was huge in that movie. Anyways, whatever. We talked far too long about Attack of the Clones.
Kenobi.
Kenobi.
Ewan's back.
Ewan McGregor, and he looks great. He looks great in this trailer. They make him look grizzled and old. And it just looks wonderful. And it has the mood of the trailer. Just everything about the trailer looks great.
I am waiting for when he uses the Force to make the whole town believe his name is Ben Kenobi. And he's a recluse like John the Baptist.
You are really kind of locked in on that part.
Well, that's how you're introduced to him in the original movie.
Yeah.
You're talking about old Ben Kenobi, that crazy guy? That's what Luke says.
Okay. It looks amazing. Are we agreed on that?
Yes. I'll be watching it.
Kenobi looks great. Let's talk about Miss Marvel. Miss Marvel trailer also dropped. What are your thoughts on Miss Marvel? I don't think you were into this trailer.
I mean, I don't know enough of this story to have any real feeling. I mean, it's a Marvel show, and so I'll watch it. But like watching the trailer, I'm a little perplexed by how the kid gets the powers. I mean, yes, there's bracelets. why does this family have the bracelets? Why are they being rude to her about superheroes before if it looks like grandma knows, oh, these bracelets have powers. Okay.
Yep. I will say they got a little Scott Pilgrim versus the World vibe going on.
Yes.
Which
early on in the trailer, I felt that, and I was ecstatic, and then it kind of drifted.
Yeah, I'm curious if that's just for the trailer or if that's going to be a part of the show. Because if that's part of the show,
I'm here for it.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Give us a different vibe and totally bite from Scott Pilgrim. That's fine. Free Guy did.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird because I heard a lot of chatter that people, like, especially older people, not into it. Obviously, it seems like it's a show made for high schoolers, right? Mm-hmm. It's very high school centric. She appears like she seems pretty young. Like, she doesn't even seem like she's like an upperclassman.
Yeah.
She seems really young.
Freshman.
I will say that here's the part of it that really intrigues me and had me excited. The stuff you talked about where she's getting made fun of for her love of superheroes. Like, this took me back to being a kid and loving comics when it wasn't popular. It made you a pariah, like you were a nerd or a geek, and that wasn't a good thing back then. And if they're going to play on that kind of theme, so like the first third of the trailer, I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm not super into it. But as soon as they introduced that element in it, I leaned forward in my seat. And when it seemed like the drama was wrapped around this idea that she gets made fun of because of her love of this world, the superhero world, I all of a sudden started heavily identifying with it, especially in high school setting, right? Because when I was in high school, it was not comic book heroes, not popular.
Batman was popular.
Yeah, see, by the time you're in high school, yeah. But when I was in high school, we didn't have any cool movies. And we had the Incredible Hulk TV show, and that was not good.
Of course, Shaq Diesel was getting the Superman logo tattooed on him and then was playing a genie. And
the Shaq version of Steel is still the weirdest thing ever.
I'm here for it.
Steel is a weird Superman-related character centered around the death of Superman storyline.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's strange, very odd. And to have Shaq play John Henry Irons.
The Shaqness.
Yeah, very weird movie. And it did not disappoint in its weirdness. We need to talk about Moon Knight. Moon Knight reviews are coming in.
Okay.
So Marvel is clearly excited about this show. They're letting their cards show a little bit because unlike a lot of their shows where they gave out a show or two as screeners, they gave out the first 4 of 6 episodes of Moon Knight to be screened.
How do I get to become a screen?
Right? And it speaks to how good they think this show is. And the reviews are pretty they're pretty exemplary. Sab Astley of The Collider says it's a brilliantly bonkers, dark, globe-trotting adventure. And he compares it to the Nicolas Cage film National Treasure. Brilliantly bonkers, dark, globe-trotting adventure. This is Marvel's trippy National Treasure. Oscar Isaac is the best addition to the MCU since RDJ. That's high praise.
That is.
Entwining torment and humor into a morally ambiguous cipher. Mark Spector is a whole new caliber of hero. That's a good review. These are all based on like tweets. Thomas Story from an outlet called Future of the Force says, I've watched the first 4 episodes of Moon Knight. It's unlike anything we've seen before from the MCU, which is a common theme in the reviews. It's a psychological thriller with a touch of Indiana Jones. It kept me on the edge of my seat the whole time, and Oscar Isaac delivers a mesmerizing performance. I think the really encouraging thing is almost everybody had something good to say about Oscar Isaac and how good he is in this.
Going back to the Star Wars sequels, he was the best part.
Yeah. I really like Oscar Isaac. And not just because he used to front a Christian ska band. which I badly wish I had the CDs of.
You should tweet him and see if he'll re-release those.
He's got to have them in a garage somewhere, right?
Yes.
What's on Disney Plus said this: I've watched the first 4 episodes of Marvel Moon Knight. It's unlike anything we've seen. Oscar Isaac is fantastic! ! I can't wait to watch the rest of the series. This isn't your typical superhero origin.
Like, I'm really ecstatic about this show. I just want better reviews. Like, give me something more to go off of other than this is unlike anything we've seen. I can say that about...
The embargo just lifted, and you're not going to get reviews until closer to the show's going to come out. That's so they can drive clicks to their website.
I'm just saying, like, Peacemaker's unlike anything I've seen. And then...
Oh, you're jealous.
I could say Penny is unlike anything I've seen. The Alfred.
How's this going to go for you when Moon Knight is better than Batman? How's that going to go for you when people love Moon Knight more than the Batman?
People.
Are you going to be okay?
People love Iron Man more than Christian Bale's Batman, and I would say you're wrong, and it's okay. And so I'll be okay. You don't worry about me.
Iron Man in the Avengers movies or in his standalone movies?
Avengers movies, because if you said it as Iron Man standalone, get out of here.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah, so people like Moon Knight. That's happening.
I mean, I'm excited, but I want a better comparison, like something to sink my teeth into.
Yeah, I'm pretty pumped. I'm pretty pumped about Moon Knight, and looking forward to a little bit more on the reviews, as you said. Let's get into our main subject. This is news, so we feel like we don't have to take a break here because it is newsworthy, and we wanted to talk about the Ukraine situation, Russia invading the Ukraine, but as it pertains to pop culture. And the first thing we need to talk about is how the Cold War has conditioned us to see Russia. This surprised me, Cody. I was not prepared for how quickly this was going to turn into a good guy versus bad guy situation. I mean, obviously we can all sit here and say that Putin is wrong and has done something terrible. But I was not prepared for how quickly it would go back to the old Cold War settings. People are really, there are some people who are like, hey, the people of Russia, they're not for this either. Let's be careful. But the reaction by pop culture in a lot of ways belies that.
Yeah. And I think it's a combination of things. One, we're still kind of in that election cycle COVID mindset that reared its head in 2020. And also Putin has a connection with the most polarizing president we've had in recent years, being Donald J. Trump. And so
those connections were all Russian propaganda. That didn't really happen. It was a vast left-wing conspiracy. Why are you laughing?
And so immediately, like, you're going to have quick, instant reactions. And with social media being the way it is, with social activism being the way it is on Twitter especially, you notice it. And I mean Facebook somewhat. I predicted that it would have to be people would just react swiftly.
Yeah. I'm looking at an article by Linda Holmes of the Great Pop Culture Happy Hour podcast. If you haven't ever listened to that, it's a wonderful podcast.
Just delightful.
And the NPR folks do a good job over there. She wrote this article about the cultural ties to Russia and how they were getting, after the Berlin Wall falls and the Soviet Union falls, how deliberate our pop culture was in trying to get over there. So I remember it was a big deal when Billy Joel went to go play in Moscow. There's a big documentary when he went, and he writes a song called Leningrad. It's funny, we talked about Billy Joel twice now.
Yes.
In this
Did
podcast.
not have that on my bingo card.
But like Western culture, it was a big deal. I remember after the Soviet Union fell, like that they got a McDonald's, and that parts of our culture were kind of going over there. It was just a big deal. And now we're seeing almost the reverse of that. And I think for a Cold War era person like myself, it's kind of scary, because then, here's the difference today and then. Back then, we wouldn't have known what Russian people thought. We know that they're not for this now because of the internet, because of everything, because they can't block out the information totally like they did back in the Cold War. But there's protests going on in Russia. There's articles coming out about the Russian evangelicals. Pastors, Christians are standing up saying, hey, we're not for this. And we're calling on the Russian government and Vladimir Putin to put a stop to it. So we know, that's the big difference, is we know that the Russian people aren't for it.
But because I watch documentaries. Yeah, I'm bringing in Chuck Norris versus Communism, that documentary.
Mm-hmm. What part specifically? What are we talking about?
So that documentary was about primarily Romania, but other satellite countries within the Soviet Union, and how Western culture was blocked out. But people sneaking in pirated movies from the United States, such as some Chuck Norris flicks.
Nice.
They help bring hope and inspiration to the people. And so maybe removing, because the Batman's not going to air in Russia.
That's right. No, the Batman.
No screenings, so they're missing out. Maybe that will inspire the people to rise up within Russia, like it inspired the people to rise up within Romania and other Soviet satellite countries.
That's the hope. And maybe the discussion we need to have is whether this will work, whether this will cause the people to rise up. Here's a short list. Russia's not being permitted to participate in Eurovision.
Take that.
Where it debuted in 1994. Western civilization musicians have been canceling Russian dates ever since the war started.
As they should. I can't think that the Russian demographic, it will make or break you. So
it's not just the arts. It's happening in sports. Russian athletes barred from the Paralympic Games.
Yeah.
That one hurts my heart a little bit.
Yes, although some of us wanted Russian athletes barred from the Olympic Games.
FIFA has banned Russian teams from participating in its soccer matches.
As they should.
They've even been removed from the FIFA 22 video game.
Oh, I wasn't playing as them anyway.
And on a personal level, the International Judo Federation stripped Putin of honorary titles in that sport. And World Taekwondo withdrew an honorary black belt that they gave to him.
The owner of Chelsea got his team removed from him.
He's Russian?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
He was the primary stakeholder within Chelsea. And
how does that work?
It's the same way they've been seizing all these yachts and stuff, that he was a Russian oligarch, and we're going to strip you of all your finances if we can. And so, like, the club can't pay people right now.
Wow. So businesses suspending business operations in Russia: McDonald's, Coke, Pepsi, Starbucks, Disney. Goldman Sachs,
Do not forget Nike.
Levi's, Blue Jeans. Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. I understand the concept. You got to hurt the people to get them to say, like, hey, we know this isn't your fault. Man, that Paralympics one is tough.
The Paralympics one's tough. The average Russian person suffering is tough. Although, like, the company's listed, I wouldn't think like it's going to do more global economic harm to Russia than, because Nike pulled out, we are not going to have any crops this year or something like that. Now, it will affect some individuals and families that, I was planning on working at the Nike factory or the Nike store, and now I can't, and so there goes a paycheck. But yeah,
Well, let me throw a scenario at you.
Okay.
If it was the United States that was guilty of some, like there were countries that weren't super down with us going into Iraq at the time.
Justifiably, maybe.
Even some that had been allies. Remember, France was pretty opposed to us going into Iraq. It prompted us to call French fries freedom fries for a little while. Remember that?
Oh, some of us still call them freedom fries, Dave.
So it's not out of the realm of possibility to switch it around and say, what if our leaders were guilty of doing something that we opposed, that we knew was wrong, and other places started doing to us? Would they do that to us, though? I don't think they would, because there's so much money here. I think part of the reason you can do that to Russia is twofold. One, because there's not as much money coming out of there. Like it's not like the United States, it's not like China. Mm-hmm. And two, I think pop culture conditioned the Americans and American companies to see them as the bad guy. I think it's easier to see Russia as the bad guy.
Well, we all know the Ruskies are secretly still commies.
And that's the weird part. I'm not arguing that they're not in the wrong here. I'm saying, is Russia the bad guy or is it Putin and the oligarchs? Because listen, I am not a geopolitical expert, but I was a history major and I've done some reading, and I'm here to tell you that no matter what Putin says, this is about oil. It's about oil and gas and resources. That's it. It's greed.
Sounds about right. I think that it's easier for us to sell the narrative of Russia being bad to get that support, and those that read more might view it as, well, it's really the oligarchs led by Putin that's really the force behind this. But we're heavily conditioned to detest that area that is known as Russia and the satellite countries of the Soviet Union.
Well, and let's talk about this specifically, because this is where pop culture comes in. We are highly conditioned. If you are over a certain age, you are highly conditioned. I was kind of stunned by how quickly we fell into Cold War thinking. Roxanne Roberts of the Washington Post wrote a great article. The headline was when Russia was the villain, how this moment echoes the era of Cold War spy novels and Rocky IV. She mentions Rocky IV specifically by name.
Well,
and she starts talking about Vladimir Putin's invasion, and she labels it right, I think. Vladimir Putin's invasion, using Russian young men and women, and it's resurrected in this narrative of Russia as the villain, which was really easy for us to do. It's resulted in, obviously, what we just talked about, businesses fleeing, boycotts, the Paralympics barring Russian athletes, FIFA not letting Russian teams compete, kicking out Russian owners of European soccer teams.
big European soccer teams.
But listen to this. This is former White House National Security Council official, Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vidman. He said this last week. This is not just a fight between Ukraine and Russia. This is a fight between good and evil. This is a fight between democracy and authoritarianism. Like that sounds like it could have come straight from the 80s, except substitute communism for authoritarianism.
I was like, you can go even further back to when McCarthyism's happening in the Red Scare with the 50s, 60s, and that affecting Hollywood and people getting blackballed because they were linked with the Communist Party. And the only reason the Communist Party is labeled as all evil is because of the Soviet Union and Russia. And so, like, you go back to the 50s and point out, well, if these influential people that are quote unquote communist sympathizers, then we must get rid of them, bar them from any entertainment whatsoever. And so you can see pop culture early on. The government can tell pop culture has a heavy influence, and so we don't want these people to be a part of it. And then flash forward, now we're using pop culture as propaganda to, well, the good guys have to win. So Rocky's going to beat the Russian after the Russian kills Apollo.
So you go back, you said go back farther. You have Rocky and Bullwinkle villains, Boris and Natasha.
They are.
Who were Russian.
I forgot about Rocky and Bullwinkle.
James Bond was always thwarting dangerous masterminds working for the Soviet Union. Rocky Balboa, who you mentioned in Rocky IV, prevails. Although the whole climax and point of that movie is so Sylvester can talk about us coming together. If I can change and you can change, everybody can change. Anyways, I've done that before.
Well,
that was just an excuse for me to do my Rocky impersonation.
And it's not us really changing. It's
them.
Yeah, we want them to change.
Right? That's the dirty little hidden secret, isn't it?
Yes.
Hey, we're good guys. We don't have to change.
And you can go back to 80s wrestling as well.
Here is a former CIA agent and co-creator of the acclaimed FX series, The Americans. Now, did you watch The Americans?
No, but I've known quite a few people that have. They say phenomenal series.
Great show. And the interesting thing about The Americans was the primary characters are Russians who are living in America undercover as Russian spies during the Cold War. But they're painted in such a way that you care for them, you care about what happens to them, you understand they were quote unquote the bad guys, but through the course of the show, you see how they think they're the good guys, right? And whether you can say whatever you want, whether they're indoctrinated, brainwashed by, we're all indoctrinated by the cultures we grow up in. That's what happens. But he did this show called The Americans, and he said this, by having an enemy that was all bad growing up, I got to, and working for the CIA, he said, I got to see myself as all virtuous. And I got to avoid, deny, and run away from any sides to myself or my country that were troubled or problematic or dark. I also got a related mission. I got something to focus on, something to care about, something to give meaning to my life, because I got to be a soldier for the good guys. And I think pop culture has a hand in this. And this is kind of what I'm getting at is, okay, we're recording this. We record our podcast inside a ministry called the Firescape Coffee House in Chanute, Kansas. And we often have the baristas working here, basically volunteering. They work for tips. And we often get college kids at our small college here in our town that are from other places. And we've had the opportunity to have a couple Russian girls here in the past few years work here.
Yes.
And who have since gone back to Russia. They were telling me they can't contact them to see how they're doing right now because Russia has shut down all social media connections like that.
They have, yeah.
And here's the thing: it's like that wall went back up, And now the only narrative out there is like Russia bad, us good. And this is the weird part pop culture played in that and is playing in it now, because I think some people see it like this guy that created the Americans, but this general that I quoted earlier, he's like speaking in that kind of language where Russians aren't the bad guys. I say this all the time, especially when Israel has, when the Israel-Gaza thing flares up. Mm-hmm. And there's a tendency to label Gaza all bad guys. I'm like, no, there's people that are living there that just want to live their lives and not have a missile fall through their roof.
Yeah.
Like, they're not all mustache twirling evil people.
So I will say, and I'll go back to a point that we do a good job. And it's not a good thing that we do, but we do a good job at propaganda. And if you can clearly identify good versus evil by a standard definition, even though that definition may be warped, in which in this case we're saying it is, that not all Russians are bad, that this is Putin's war. But go back to wrestling in the 80s. You have Hulk Hogan, American hero. You have like
the Bolsheviks.
The Bolsheviks
were the bad guys.
You have Koloff. You have Kozlov. And then still not that long ago, this would probably be the early to late aughts. You have Rusev, who is portraying himself as part of the Russian Federation.
Wow.
That go against Olympic hero Mark Henry. And so, like the WWF/WWE has continued this narrative because it's clearly defined within our culture now. It's not just so much part of a slim spectrum. This is a common stereotype. Russians are bad.
Yeah.
The U.S. is good. Let's go with it.
Well, and here's the kicker for that, because we actually talk about this concept on our radio show a lot that airs on a station KFEX here in Cheney, Kansas. If anyone wants to look up KFEX931.com, check it out. But we have a morning show, and we actually talk about this concept of us versus us and them, and why that's bad.
Yeah.
Why that once you get into that sort of thinking, it's a bad place to be if you're trying to love everybody.
Yes.
Because us versus them is a concept that's not righteous from the beginning. Because basically what you're doing by placing yourself in an us versus them concept is you're trying to build yourself up. I'm a good person. And if you're going to do that, there has to be a them. There has to be a bad person.
Too much pride in that I'm the good person. And then, just that mindset of, well, this group of people cannot be redeemed. They can't be shown grace or mercy or love or compassion in those situations. It's not a good place, especially if you go with the narrative, although we're definitely moving away from that narrative, but it's still there that the United States is a Christian nation. If you go with that narrative, we can't be a part of an us versus them narrative, and yet throughout the history of the United States, it has been an us versus them.
There's a quote, and it might have been C.S. Lewis. I'm not positive, but he said the line of between good and evil goes down the middle of every human heart. And his point was, he was saying that there is no us and them. There's only us. And that you can't we can't put ourselves in these us versus them dichotomies. And this is kind of what we're getting at, is that did the Cold War and did pop culture specifically condition us? So Weisberg, the creator of The Americans, he goes on. He says, as a young adult, that he was especially influenced by the movie Red Dawn.
Yeah.
A 1984 movie that pitted Soviet soldiers, had them invading the United States, and pitted them against a group of American high school students. He says this, quote, "For me, that was my great fantasy. That was exactly what I wanted. The Soviets to invade, and then someone could give me a gun, send me into the woods with a bunch of my friends to fight them." And I identified with that because I remember that. I remember watching that movie and getting geeked up and daydreaming in class about paratroopers falling out of the sky outside my high school. Like, I remember feeling that. I know what he's talking about. And it conditions you to think again, yeah, us and them, good guys, bad guys. And it's interesting because we just talked about this with 1883. We just discussed that dichotomy of good guys versus bad guys, cowboys versus Indians, and how 1883 kind of thwarted that narrative of the old Western and made everybody human. There's good and there's bad in all of it, in all people. And so it's interesting that we've just been talking about this, and then this happens. A year after Red Dawn comes out, Rocky IV comes out, Russia, like, not only is Ivan Drago mean, the Soviet boxer,
yeah,
he's on roids, of course, against Rocky, who's the perfect, pure hero. Drago is on roids. Him and his wife don't seem to have a loving relationship.
Yeah.
Drago turns on his Russian mentors at the end, but only after he starts losing. And Weisberg says he bought into the evil empire narrative about the Soviet Union. It wasn't until he read a memoir by a former KGB officer that he developed a more nuanced view. And that's kind of what I'm talking about is because of pop culture, what pop culture does, is that part of the reason we lack nuance in a lot of things? Does pop culture condition us for good versus bad?
It's really easy for us to know who and what to root for when that happens.
Mm-hmm.
Although there are outliers where you kind of have these anti-heroes that you're like, they're not completely good. But at the end of the day, they kind of fall on the right thing to do. But for the most part, we like when there's a clear line of this person is completely bad and this person's completely good.
But do we? Or are we just conditioned to like it? Because here's what I'll say. I would argue that the MCU, the Marvel movie universe, is successful in part due to the fact that their villains aren't like DC's villains. Joker's just intrinsically evil. Riddler in this new movie is pretty intrinsically just evil. He's broken, and so is the Joker. It's clear they're broken, but there's nothing redeemable. Meanwhile, in the Marvel universe, you have Thanos, who thinks he's actually helping the universe with its overcrowding problem. You've got Killmonger, who seems like had to have a legitimate familial claim to what he says he's claiming, and you feel for him. Like they have...
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
So I will say that Killmonger might have the biggest liking in the MCU universe movies, but like I almost think it's more because it's Michael B. Jordan than the actual character itself. Thanos.
What about the Thanos was right people?
That is such a small group of people. That is such a small group of people. And I don't like, there's no one that's like, oh my goodness, like I just fell in love with Thanos. He did such a great job. Like the points, they developed the character so well. Where in DC, you actually do have people that fall in love with the villains. And it's weird. But I would point out someone that I think in the Multiverse of Madness we're going to see kind of have a changing of the guard. Scarlet Witch, I think, would be a bigger hero or a bigger person if we were about characters that have flaws, that occasionally do something bad and something good. Mm-hmm. But instead, we're all about Steve Rogers. He's great. Oh, Iron Man. He was great because he had his heart broken, but everything he did was because he loved us so much.
Okay, you bring up an interesting character because Captain America, Steve Rogers, is the epitome of Cold War.
He is.
He's the American Boy Scout.
Bucky is a Soviet bot now.
Oh, man. Well, Bucky. Okay, so Winter Soldier doesn't come around, though. Bucky's just a long-lost American hero until much after the Soviet Union falls. So the Winter Soldier's not created till the early aughts. I believe maybe mid-aughts. And so that's kind of a new sensibility where, like, oh, he's Russian. He's a Russian operative, but we like Bucky because he's brainwashed. He's brainwashed.
Yes. That's why we can take him back.
But Steve Rogers, that's an interesting aspect because he's like, man, if there's a stand-in for that era, it's him. Mm-hmm. He's the Boy Scout. He's too good. Just all good. Not a bad bone in his body.
I'm trying to think, does Superman have a Russian villain? Do they ever tie Lex back to like a Russian family?
No. Superman's interesting. DC's interesting because they're never as political as Marvel.
Yeah.
They never get into the politics as much as Marvel does until the last few years.
And then like G.I. Joe had what was their names?
Cobra?
Well, Cobra wasn't the
October Guard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They had the October Guard, in which at one time I think they team up.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Because they got to team up against Cobra. That was that was when we were in our let's feel good about teaming up with Russia thing. Yeah. After when the Soviet Union's fallen. But they also Cobra had the two Russian twin bad guys. The twins.
That's right.
Tomas and they didn't even have Russian names, which made it hilarious because they were supposed to be Russian. Oh man. Pop culture is just, it's all over this idea. We didn't want nuance, okay? Nuance is kind of a new word for us, and it's still a minority of us who are calling for it, because you can't know the real world unless you see the nuance. But we didn't want, nuance wasn't a part of the Cold War. Millions of fans just, this article says, inhaled Cold War spy thrillers. John le Carre, Robert Ludlum, Tom Clancy.
Oh, yeah.
Then there's James Bond.
Jimmy Bond.
Who, I mean...
Like, all the Sean Connery films have a Russian bad guy.
Ian Kinane, a professor of popular literature and culture at the University of Roehampton, and the founding editor of the International Journal of James Bond Studies. That's a thing. He said James Bond's obsession with Russia has long signaled Western discontent with its Soviet enemy of old. Indeed, the Bond franchise has always been at its most lewdly outlandish and political confrontational when it is Bond facing down Mother Russia. From the toad-like Rosa Klebb and From Russia with Love, and the slippery General Koskov in The Living Daylights, to the lunacy of Steven Berkoff's General Orlov in Octopussy, and rampant sexual acrobatics of Famke Janssen's Xenia Onatopp in Goldeneye.
Yeah.
Bond's Russian adversaries have always been veritable parody. Beneath the hyperbole, however, lies Ian Fleming's deeply troubling concern with the operations of SMERSH, the umbrella counterintelligence organization of the Red Army, and the primary antagonists of Fleming's early Cold War Bond thrillers. That's end quote.
Okay.
I mean, James Bond, that's what it is. It's like he's going up against Russia.
Well, someone has to, evidently.
Oh, man. And then, of course, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about Miracle. Based on the Miracle on Ice. And
sports has conditioned us.
Yeah.
There's a lot of feelings towards Soviets and Russia in the Olympics, because it seems like there's always a doping scandal with Russia. And so always like, how and why are they allowed to compete?
Well, the movie, the movie of Miracle, the Miracle on Ice game is something I remember. Also, I believe it was in the Summer Olympics of 76. They always make a big deal about that. Or was it 80? It might have been 80 where the United States basketball team lost to the Russian basketball team in the gold medal game, and like they said it was that it was a home cooking job. It might have been in Russia. I'm not positive. I think that was in 1980, and the American basketball team just kind of gets hosed, and that was a big deal. I remember hearing about that as a kid. But the Miracle on Ice hockey game at the 1980 Winter Olympics, Lake Placid, a group of young amateurs go up against the USSR team with its professional players and repeated gold medalists. You've got the Al Michaels with the famous, "Do you believe in miracles?" Best-selling author David Baldacci says this: "I grew up thinking the Soviet Union wanted to destroy us. I saw that through my TV. I saw it through books. I saw it through movies." Baldacci was a poli-sci major in college. He said the Gulag Archipelago changed his understanding of Russia, but it was a clear decision back then. It was good versus evil, almost like Hitler versus the Allies. And after World War II and Hitler's gone, I mean, immediately Stalin takes that place for us.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when even the way we teach history, Stalin is told in a way that he's just as bad as Hitler.
He is the heir apparent to that title. So if I go to our profession, being pastors, I would go to the book of Jonah.
Mm-hmm.
The United States is Jonah.
Yeah.
We are conditioned to hate the Ninevites.
Yeah. And we're conditioned to not forgive.
Not forgive at all.
They don't deserve it. Yeah.
They have done all these horrible things, and we can point to all the horrible things that have happened through the years in that particular area, and we could say, oh, look at how bad they are, and look at how they treat their own citizens and how they try to conquer the little guys and wipe them off the face of the earth. Because, I mean, the Soviets and Russia have tried to do this, but it also ignores the plank in our own eye. And then it leads to this point of, does it do us well to be angry? And how can I not care for all these souls?
Yeah. It was, as pastors and as Christians, and I know that some people may listen to this and say, well, not the Christians I know. And we're well aware. Mm-hmm. We're well aware that there's people using and claiming the following of Jesus Christ and not putting out a great image of that. But if you're doing it right, as followers of Jesus, we're conditioned to see individuals and to not label swaths of humanity good and bad. We understand that, in fact, we would quote Jesus a lot by saying, "Why do you call me good? No one's good except God." Mm-hmm. And he goes on to say that there's not one good person. We're all bad. So we're conditioned to look at the individuals and conditioned to not separate ourselves into an us versus them dichotomy. And so I think we're conditioned to kind of see through this. But it's interesting as I go back to this article in the Post, this Weisberg who created the Americans, he got an email this week from a friend of his who's a 30-year-old Russian. So Weisberg's older, from the Cold War generation like me. And his 30-year-old Russian friend said this. He says, "My generation sees through the lies about this war, my Russian generation, and your American generation doesn't." He says it's a generational divide. And for better or worse, pop culture played a role in this. And yeah, can we see this? Pop culture has conditioned us to maybe say us versus them, but is this really just a Putin thing? It's just, he's the bad guy. It's greed. And that, like, I keep going back to that. It's just greed.
Yeah.
There is no Ivan Drago. There is no, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's just bad leaders.
And like, without knowing much about the the nature of how to go about this. I mean, I don't know what the answer is for us as a culture besides not labeling a whole country like the scum of the earth.
Yeah. But let me make one more pop culture reference here in reference to this. Do you remember the end of Red Dawn?
They're too old and washed up.
Okay, yeah. It doesn't make any sense. So the end of Red Dawn, the Wolverines, the high school kids been hiding out in the mountains and been a good rebel force against the invading Russians and Cubans. Cubans are a part of this, and as well as maybe a couple other, but it's mainly Russians and Cubans. And Patrick Swayze and Charlie Sheen, the brothers, say, we're going in for one last run. They send everyone else off to the demilitarized zone to escape. They say, we're all used up, which doesn't make any sense, but just go with me here. And they go in this last suicidal attack on the Russian encampment and the Cubans that are there as well. And at the end of the movie, an enemy soldier, one of the enemy leaders, has them dead to rights. He's got a gun trained on Patrick Swayze's character holding Charlie Sheen. He's carrying Charlie Sheen. He's dying or dead. He's dying. He's not dead yet. But he's been wounded, and it's clear that he's not fighting anymore. He's just carrying his brother off to die. And it's the Cuban who lowers his gun and kind of nods at him. It's the Cuban who we see showing the softening of the heart. The Russians are cold-blooded killers in that movie. They have no remorse in their killing in that movie. And I think it's hilarious that in the big climax, it's the Cuban who, because you get several scenes in the movie where the Cuban talks about going home and he can't wait to get home to see his wife and his kids. And that's the big scene. Like, even in that, we're conditioned to see the Russians as cold-hearted killers. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. Although you talking about the Cuban in that movie made me think of the parable of the Good Samaritan. Mm-hmm. And so maybe it's not a Russian issue or an American issue. Maybe it's just a first world country power issue.
Yeah, that may be.
And that the two nations that should know better keep messing it up.
I think it is up to the regular people to lift their voices and say, hey, I have no hatred for my Russian brothers and sisters. Mm-hmm. And I'm praying for my Ukrainian brothers and sisters. But I have no hatred for them, the Russian brothers and sisters, and I sympathize with them as well. Because although they're not being attacked, this is hard on them as well. They live in a place where this kind of control can be exercised. Like I said, social media has been kind of shut down there. And it shows how quickly that a quote unquote free-ish society can quickly be turned back into something else.
Yeah.
So, yeah. It's interesting to talk about. This is an interesting subject, how pop culture figures into the way we view this conflict now. And I just thought it would be an interesting topic, and it has proven to be that.
I agree.
Yeah. Love to hear your thoughts. Go comment on when we post this. Go find the podcast post. We always post the latest episode. Give us a comment on Twitter or Facebook. Tell us what you think, what you thought of what we talked about here. Tell us how pop culture has maybe adjusted your view of how you see Russia and what age you are, and if it has shaped it in any way. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
I will say, I think that older millennials, such as myself, we come in right as like TV stations are becoming, there's more of them, and they're needing to fill content. And so there's a lot of Rocky reruns that are happening. And so it's just naturally ingrained, even though by the time I'm around, Soviet Union's long gone. But you just know the Russians are always up to something.
Rocky 4. Yeah. I mean, even War Games or War Games. The old Matthew Broderick movie. While there are really no Russians present in the movie, they're the unseen enemy.
They are. Yeah. They're always the bad guys in whatever's airing on TNT or TBS.
As the computer says, and I can't remember the computer's name in War Games, the only way to win is not to play the game.
Oh, so deep.
It is deep. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. Subscribe to a Pop Culture Pastor podcast. Leave us a review. That helps us out a lot. And share us. Thanks so much. We'll see you next week.
See you in the next Pop Culture Pastor.